Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Ryan Somerville and thanks for watching part 2 as Kevin Hay, Matt Collings, and myself discuss how we reworked the trailer for Dune. In this second part, we learned from Matt how he created the sound design for the iconic sandworm. Thanks for watching. You know, since you are in the career of making monster noises, like when you see a monster,
many, not just monster noises,
not just monster noises.
How did Matt approach the squirmy wormy bit?
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah, yeah, it was funny because I basically did all that stuff. That was the only part of the trailer that I worked on was that last 30 seconds maybe, and I did it all very quickly because I had said I was going to work on it earlier and I just didn't get around to it. So I did it all super fast, and looking back at it, there's probably some stuff that I would have worked on longer and done slightly differently, but I think overall, I think there was some really nice things about it. The main sound of the worm, the actual kind of like voice of it, is taken from an alligator recording that was recorded at 192 kilohertz. So it's got tons and tons of high frequency content, and then it's slowed down by, I think it's basically played at like sort of not quite as half of its speed, and then probably like pitched down, rendered out, and then pitched down again. So it's like, so it just has this kind of like pulsating kind of moan to it, but it doesn't really resemble anything anime. So that's the idea of like you take animal recordings and you try to abstract them. So that's like the kind of main body of it, I would say. And then I took that, basically just repitched it through multiple means. I layered it up with Dehumanizer, which is one of our plugins, as a layer to give it just a bit more kind of weirdness. So Dehumanizer is there in as a layer. And then there's some other things like, so there's a kind of like a actual kind of vocalization, kind of squawk towards the very end when it appears, which I felt was kind of missing when I did the first pass on it. Like it needs to kind of like just like vocalize something like its arrival. So I think that's actually I've got the session here. Look, it's a seal, I think. Yeah, so there's various seals and elephant seals and stuff in there, just as kind of layers to give it a bit more shape. And then that is from a seal. There's a cat hissing as well, pitched down way down as well. Because the great thing about repitching animal sounds in particular is that it still feels like an animal, even though it doesn't sound like the animal anymore. There's like that inherent language to it that is just transposed, which is really important. So that's what makes it work, even if you don't mangle them too much. Trying to layer things into a coherent voice was a bit tricky, and I don't think I got that quite right, but I think it's a good general direction. And then the other parts of that sequence that I worked on were kind of movement elements, and then sort of SFX elements, like the rumble that you see when it first appears. So I did all of the rumble using Reformer Pro, which is one of our plugins, because I needed something that like had a lot of texture, but also had movement. And you can do that really fast with that plugin. And it's got like so you can use that, like you can feed your voice into it and control it that way. But because I was working at speed and I didn't have a mic, I actually just did it all like in the box, even not like this setup, in my kitchen. There's a way you can just kind of like use a slider to kind of like interact with it. So that's kind of what I did. I just wanged the slider around to get a general shape. And it was like a mix of, I think I've even got it, I can share my screen, but it's like layers of like ice and bonfire and rocks and stuff. And I recorded that, got something that was like a shape. Then I think I pitched it down and then slammed it through some multi-band compression to give it more body, change the tonality of it, make it feel a bit more hyper-real. But I was able to get that sound like really quickly, probably within about 10 minutes. And that's kind of what you hear. There was then under kind of upper layer of rocks, give some high frequency, a little bit more, which is very subtle, but if you take it away, it kind of doesn't feel right. And actually, Kev, I used one of your wind procedural audio patches to generate the ambience because, again, I was trying to do it all really fast. I didn't have a lot of ambiences to hand. So I just through this. So this is something that Kev made in Maximus P years ago. That was that generates wind effects. And the really nice thing about that version of that patch you did, Kev, it had a load of like LFO stuff in it, multiple layers. So I just like set it generating, and then captured maybe a minute of it.
And then chop it up, pitch it. Yeah.
Put that in as a layer. So that's the actual kind of wind effect, especially because it's nighttime. You would feel like there would be this quite ominous
something.
Yeah. So that was that layer. And there's when the worm comes up from the sand, I felt like I needed something to like punctuate that. So that's actually, it sounds like thunder, but it's actually a gunshot. So that's from our weaponizer library. It's another plugin that we make. So that's a gunshot of a sniper rifle from 5 meters away, pitched down 45 semitones. But because again, it's high frequency, still sounds right. And then again, that's slammed through a ton of saturation and compression, multiple stages to just make it sound like a massive thunderclap. Because again, I didn't have a thunderclap handy, so I thought I'll just make one. And that has a kind of feel to it that's not thunder. It's not thunder, you know what I mean? Thunder would probably also work, like, but
that's too thundery.
It
sounds like thunder. Yeah, I know.
So I had another question too, which is, since you are in the career of making monster noises, like when you see a
many, not just monster noises,
just monster noises, but well, I mean, maybe it's just a general sound design question too. When you see something as iconic as the sandworm, and you have to create a sound that brings that digital creature to life. I mean, besides the technical answer that you gave us conceptually, like how do you even come up with like what the hell does a sandworm even sound like?
I mean, I have seen the original Dune, the David Lynch version, many times, but I couldn't for the life of me remember what they sounded like.
Right.
So, I mean, I don't know if that fed into my idea of what they should be like. They probably did, but it was basically, just watching it totally silent, being like, it feels like a huge mammal, something, and it moves a lot, and it would have a pulse. I felt like it would have a pulsating nature to it. So you sort of start with those things, and I imagine those would be the kind of notes that you would get from a director, being like, it's this kind of thing. Usually in that relationship between sound designer and director, the director doesn't know exactly what they want most of the time. It's like, it needs to be a bit like this, right? Now you go and deliver
explore
that. Yeah, exactly. Right. So that's what I started with. I think that's kind of the right approach. I mean, I'm sure that plenty of people would have gone differently. I think actually if you'd started with birds as well, that could have been quite interesting because again, it has a kind of pulsating thing, particularly if you slow bird song down, it basically just becomes a pulse. So that could have been another direction to go in. But yeah, the general idea was some big mammal. How do you do that? And make it surreal as well, because obviously there are no big mammals that are giant worms that are multiple miles long, If there are, I don't know about them. There's more and more of the kind of cross blending of the two disciplines these days, I think. So I was talking to another sound designer I know through work, Joseph Frioli, who's amazing. He worked on Tenet, and he worked on a film called Kin that Mogwai did the soundtrack of, and he knows the guys from way back as well. And he was saying that they did a lot of work together on combining elements of the score and the sound design to make something that really gelled together. Which is like an interesting example specifically of that, but I know that this is much more of a common thing now. And you say, like thinking about sounds in terms of registers, and it needs a high frequency layer or mid layer. It would be the same you're arranging orchestrally, or doing a mix of a band or whatever. These are all like coherent concepts across all the disciplines.
And it reminds me of like the line where like when does Foley stop and when does sound design begin? You're like, oh well, we've got that on the wall, we could just give them an extra squeak and a couple of bangs. It's like, it's not technically the Foley we've been asked to give them, but it works with that in there, and then you receive that. You're like, oh, I'm so happy that they took the chance and gave me that. That's awesome. We can work with, and again, that bridge is blurry rather than straight lines, and I've always liked the blurry stuff.
The original Godzilla sound, the kind of creature, is made with like I think it's a leather glove coated in tar, scraped on a double bass.
Cool.
So it's like a Foley approach using a musical instrument, right?
Yeah.
So that's a perfect example of where the two totally blur.
Yeah.
You know, in the end, you're just trying to make a sound that's going to, like, you know, raise the back of the hairs on your neck, observer, and kind of where it comes from is almost relevant.
Yeah, it reminds me of, I was wondering if, Matt, because you were, you know, you kind of had to work at speed, you reached for tools that you know intimately, and then they're not really seen as tools. Especially a lot of the Krotos stuff, you kind of play them as instruments. So I'm wondering, you know, it's the performative stuff which for me it always reminds me of Foley and why it's so important. And I, you know, I do that when I'm lecturing at work. It's like you can't replace performance. It doesn't matter where it is. In MIDI as well, it's like, don't click it with a mouse. That's a form of performance. You know, clicking, entering, and that's okay. Like entering MIDI notes with a mouse is okay, but it will sound different if you just play them in. Even on a shitty MIDI keyboard, that will change everything. And I think, you know, coming back to Matt, it's like you decided to perform with tools that you knew, so there's a layer that you don't have to fight. You know, you don't have to learn that thing to play it first. That will give you a different performance. And you know, I think it's fun. It's just fun mashing sounds. Big means pitch down often. Doesn't have to.
Thanks for watching part 2. Be sure to hit like and subscribe to watch part 3 when we speak with Kevin Hay to learn how he mixed and mastered the trailer for Dune. Thanks again.
The squirmy wormy bit.
Yeah.